I'm going to give you a bit of the Indian perspective on Tantra based on what I've learned through the show. And my explanation of these things is limited because of the nature of the English language.
Sure.
I think English has its own purpose, and the English language helps you understand things logically and in a practical manner. But there's certain Sanskrit words, which is our ancient Indian language, that can't be translated easily.
Yeah.
So if I am having a conversation with an Indian Tantra expert, sometimes they tend to get a little bit upset with me for using like these kind of definitions. But I'm going to speak for the sake of the Western audience here as well. So basically, in Indian Tantra, it's primarily based on yantras, which are objects or symbols, and mantras, which are chants. But maybe a Western equivalent to understand a chant better would be a spell. And when I use the word spell in front of an Indian Tantra expert, they tend to get a little bit upset. They say that no, it's not a spell. It's much more powerful than just a spell. Now, each mantra is related to a deity, one of our gods, and it definitely has a certain purpose. Like in Harry Potter, they have Expecto Patronum for a certain thing. So we have mantras for purposes in the same manner. What we truly believe in India is that Hinduism should be called Hinduism. It should be called Sanatan Dharma, which loosely translates to the eternal faith. And what I've learned through the show is that elements of Sanatan Dharma parallels are present in African culture in the form of voodoo, in Indonesian and Southeast Asian culture in the form of animism, and in the West in the form of what you're involved in.
Sure.
Would you like to say anything based on what I said?
Absolutely. So you'll find that Western magicians still very often use Indian mantra, particularly if they have a meditation practice. So for a meditation practice, the use of mantra and breath is something which is seen as a fundamental skill. Obviously, for an Indian tantric, what we do might look quite basic. We would define spell slightly differently. So I wouldn't describe mantra in the terms of spell.
How would you describe mantra?
The use and chanting a mantra in a Western magical practice would be to do with thought stopping, with stilling the mind, with running the energy orbit through the system. So we'd be using mantra in those ways. So very often we've taken that from an Indian approach. Whereas if we were to use a word like spell, for example, a spell would be more describing a constructed ritual with a spoken element, with a performative element, not necessarily with yantra, but with a combination of items or objects which are assembled at a particular time, under particular circumstances, and are empowered through that. So we have a lot of similarities, but we also have quite a few differences. Aside from the Indian use of mantra, a lot of people have also taken our tradition back to a period in history of syncretism, which we can see as Greco-Egyptian. So
Really?
So at this period, we've been drawing a lot. One of the most important magical texts which has been used by us is a series of texts called the Greco Magical Papyri. And these are a collection of texts and techniques which contain barbarous words. So long strings of syllables, and the chanting, the recitation of these words are used to put the practitioner into an altered state of consciousness. So we're using them in that way too.
You just explained mantra in English in a very accurate way. Like I think any Indian tantric would be sitting in front of you would say, yeah, that's a much more accurate description than just using the word as spell.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's great.